Hello and welcome to The Stack. For this week's show, I had the pleasure to speak with Zoltan Varga, the CEO and chairman at Central Media, one of the biggest media groups in Hungary. We also speak with the new editors-in-chief of Design Anthology. Enjoy the show. From Midori House in London, this is The Stack, 30 minutes of print industry analysis, and I am Fernando Augusto Pacheco. I've recently came back from Budapest, which hosted the annual DistriPress event, a meeting of distributors from across the globe, the people responsible for bringing our magazines and newspapers to the shelves. While in Budapest, I visited the headquarters of Hungarian media group Central Media to speak with its CEO, Zoltan Varga. Central Media is one of Hungary's leading independent media companies, with top-selling magazines such as Monocle. Varga is also involved with Grammy Media in Poland, publisher of daily newspaper Rzeczpospolita. Zoltan is also a Viktor Orban critic and defends the free press fiercely. Let's hear it from him. Zoltan Varga, what a pleasure meeting you here in Budapest. Very good timing as well. Zoltan, I've been reading about Central Media, what a fantastic group, but I wonder if you can give us an introduction of Central Media in the media landscape here in Hungary as well, in terms of size and more.
So thank you very much. It's my pleasure actually being here and speaking to you. We celebrating a 10-year anniversary actually this year. We bought, in plural because I have two partners, but I'm almost 90%, so I'm representing the majority in the ownership. But frankly, we bought this asset 10 years ago. It used to be Sanoma. Sanoma is a big Finnish media company. They're operating in media and education. And luckily, we crisscrossed later on each other's ways, and I will tell you later on how we met with Sanoma. Frankly, I used to be a private equity investor, and I thought it's a good deal. So we invested in the media 10 years earlier, and we realized later on that, first of all, it's unique. It's media. Second, it has a huge impact, not only politically, but sociologically, empathically. I think it's very important what we write, how we write. So we are shaping actually the people's life and how the people think about the common speech. And I think it's important how we drive, whether we are able to drive actually the mental health of the society. And third, later on we realize it's a kind of trap taking into consideration the political environment. First of all, we wanted to sell the assets at a good price, but we realized if and when we would like to keep the independent free media alive in a big scale in Hungary, we have to protect Central Media, and it has to be a good hands. So that's why we still believe that a Central Media is still in the best hands, and that's why we didn't sell it to the government-related people, because we fear that the independence of the Hungarian media market will be disturbed even more, or will be destroyed even more. So I think media and Central Media became a passion for us. So it's a pretty much mission-driven investment. And after a few years, we realized if and when we would like to survive and we would like to keep our aim and targets and vision to protect in the media, we have to grow. So we cannot stay only in Hungary, and we realized that there's a path actually to create a Central East European media company in a big scale, which will actually will have a unique voice. And I think with the Eastern European thinking, we can turn things around even in Western Europe, and we can influence the public speeches actually in the European Union as well. So that's why we invested in titles in Slovakia, Czech Republic, and last year we invested in Poland, where we became a shareholder in Grammy Media, which is the publisher of Rzeczpospolita, the largest and the most respected newspaper and the oldest newspaper in Poland. We are very proud being an owner of Rzeczpospolita. And earlier we invested in education in Poland. It's called SIP. It was the education business where we actually were competing with Sanoma. So Sanoma has an entity called Nova Era in Poland, and we were competing. But as things turned positive in Poland after the elections, which were held in October last year, and the new government came on board, the stock exchange and the asset prices reflected actually those changes. So they are significantly higher, and more people came actually to invest in Poland. And we met actually one of the industry leader in this respect, and he acquired a business from us. It's called Infinitas Group. They are present in several countries in Europe, and they are one of the largest education business provider. So we exited, but at the same time we are building our media business center in Eastern Europe. So we are not satisfied only with 4 countries, so we're looking the opportunities further in Slovakia and in many other countries. Why I'm specifically mentioning Slovakia? Because the political changes which took place last year, they are very much hurting the independence of the media and actually blocking kind of the free speech. I think it's a buying opportunity for us. We learned in the past 10 years how to operate, how to fight against the government or oppression. So that's why we are kind of used to operate in such circumstances. It's not easy. There are daily threats in the Slovak market. And for instance, what we experience so far in Hungary, that we don't have any revenue from the state, for instance. The Hungarian state is the biggest advertiser on the market, but believe it or not, we have 0 revenue from the state. And we still survive, we are flourishing, we are a profitable company because we have fantastic titles, good colleagues, so we are faring well, relatively compared to the headwind. But we feel that we kind of adapted to these circumstances. That's why we can easily adapt to circumstances which are completely new in Slovakia. So what we learned actually in Hungary, we can accommodate in other countries. It's a kind of sad story because you don't want to accommodate things which happened actually lately in Hungary, but we have to, so that's the reality.
And I want to know, let's focus on your titles here in Hungary. I have here in front of me a great selection of titles. It's really vast. I mean, how many titles overall? 19 or?
I think altogether with the digital titles, we have more than 50 titles.
Tell me more about the titles. For example, I think I'm holding one of your best-selling.
Yeah, it's called Monocle Radio.
Monocle Radio. It looks amazing. I don't speak Hungarian, but I was, browsing through the magazine, and I can't believe it's weekly. And there's how many copies printed?
We are selling still 140,000 copies per week in Monocle Radio. Monocle Radio is the oldest female newspaper in the country. We are just celebrating this 75th anniversary. We are very proud because it's all about families, all about values, without any politics. So for instance, Monocle Radio is very famous that not interfering with any politics. We were approached in the last couple of years many times by mostly government-related politicians that they would like to appear on the cover page or they would like to be interviewed. And we said clearly, no, this is about family values and no politics. So we're not disturbing actually our readers with politics. They have enough actually. When they watch the TV, when they listen to the radio, I think they are really fed up with politics. We would like to give them actually good feeling. We have fairy tales from several countries, so they are able to read fairy tales for the kids. And this is a value-driven magazine, and people love it.
So just to be clear, when you think about the market for all your titles, you're not just talking about the urban people who live in Budapest. Are you thinking about the whole country?
Absolutely.
Because you have other titles like this one, Meglepetes, which perhaps might be interested for people living in the countryside, in smaller towns as well.
Frankly, most of our readers are coming from the countryside.
Oh, wow.
So we are present everywhere, and I think most of our digital titles come in the cities, whereas the print is very much sold and consumed on the countryside. it's very unique that we have a very strong distribution system in the country, and I think it's helping to maintain the readership, because if you cannot get your title, people are not fighting for it. So it's a convenience, pleasure, getting your newspaper wherever you can. And the distribution system allows for the citizens, even on the countryside, to go into a specific retail shop. They can buy all titles. So it's very convenient. It's like having access through internet to have the digital. It's very easy. It's more difficult with the print, but it's feasible. It's totally fine. So it's a reliable, good business model. And I think it's also rare that we are making more money in print than in digital. People think, wow, that's not possible. It is possible. And we do it, we can prove it. And we have kind of heart which is living with the books. We are a book publisher. And last year we had a record year in book, and people love to read. So books still part of our life. And although 50% of the population is still reading, but for this 50%, reading is more important than the food or something else. So I think it's probably they will buy a book and not the third bread or something like this. So I think they can select what to consume. And for them, book is really important, and reading is important.
I'm very curious about the Hungarian market, because many countries, I guess, they're different about what they read. I have a feeling here that weekly magazines like Lapia that you mentioned, they are very popular. So that's kind of what sells, because that's not necessarily in the UK. I can't think of like a women's weekly that would sell so many copies. But it's quite an interesting...
It's still selling well, but I think in Central Eastern Europe, the weekly magazine market was created by the Germans. Mm-hmm. So the German publishers came in, Poland, Czech Republic, Slovakia, and Hungary, and they created a market for it. So there is a need. So people love reading the weekly magazines. And when the Germans left, and whoever bought actually those titles, they are still in good hands and they're doing well. So frankly, there's a habit reading, and although those countries and Eastern European countries are a big consumer of television as well, but print is still alive and doing quite well. The dailies, not really, so this is where we fit totally into the trend that only a few print titles can survive, and only the big ones. Financial Times, New York Times, whatever, but or like Rzeczpospolita in Poland, where we are owners. But frankly, it's shrinking. So at the end of the day, it will be a digital market. But to produce weekly, print, you feel good quality, good pictures, people like it. So I think the print will shrink further, no doubt, but it will stay with us. So it will be a more and more expensive product, and it will not be for everyone. So a certain part of the society will consume it, will read it, but it will be part of our life.
I'm curious, would you ever consider or would you like to be involved in the daily market here in Hungary, like you were in Poland with the newspaper, or is that something that you deliberately avoid?
Deliberately. So I'm not willing to be part of the daily. It's a very difficult market. And frankly, you are competing with the online news, and it's hard to compete with those. So I think it's a crowded market, it's an over-competitive market, and you can win only when you have extraordinary good content or a legacy. And for instance, Rzeczpospolita is a legacy in Poland. So whoever you meet in Poland, they know Rzeczpospolita. And the decision makers love Rzeczpospolita. So we are the title actually for the decision makers and for the government, and so it's very important. But for instance, in Rzeczpospolita we have a program. We are giving free the title away to students, because we would like to them accommodate that this is the newspaper which I have to have. Later, when they can afford, they will be paying for it. But we are happy to give them free the title so they can learn this voice.
It's fantastic. And I know now it's been a while, at least a year, how has been the reaction of the Poles knowing that you started investing and getting involved in the paper, being a Hungarian? Was there any issues at all with that?
No, I'm very happy in Poland. I'm very much welcome. So there's an old rule that Poles and Hungarians are good old friends, and I felt always a warm welcome in Poland. So I'm a very happy investor there, and I feel like it's a kind of second home. So I'm on a monthly basis. I'm there, bi-weekly probably. So depending on the business cycle, but never ever met corruption. The colleagues are fantastic, so hard workers. So I'm very happy in Poland, and they didn't have any issue that Respospolit is owned by Hungarian.
Because it's so normal these days, right? It's not just, I think it's interesting. Let's talk about some of your other titles as well. You not only have the original Hungarian titles that were mentioned, but you also do the licensing for Marie Claire for National Geographic with great Hungarian editions as well. I mean, this Marie Claire is looking lovely. So tell us how big of it is for you, those?
We used to publish more actually. So we were the publisher of Elle, Cosmopolitan, Marie Claire earlier, but we lost those titles because either they were not doing very well in the print form, and we did them in digital form, or someone had a kind of hobby feeling that they would like to be a publisher for those titles, and they basically outbid us. They offered to license holder such an enormous amount the publisher couldn't resist. Certainly, it's a headache. I can't name you a title which we published. They took it over, and now there's not anymore on the market. So we always told to the license holder, trust us, because we do it for 20 years, and we will be doing it for 20 years. Someone, a cavalier or someone is coming and knocking and offering you a huge amount of money, just send him away, because it's not going to work. Unfortunately, we were right. So I believe the titles which are not anymore with us will be dying or not anymore on the market. But we are very happy with Marie Claire, we are very happy with National Geographic. I think we share the same values. I think we have the same mindset like the publisher of National Geographic and Marie Claire. So I think it's easy to do business with them because we are the same ground. And although those titles are also shrinking in terms of circulation, but we are a happy publisher.
And I want to look ahead for 2025. Are you optimistic? Because we were talking about, working with media, being the founder of a media group. There's a sense of responsibility, a political sense of responsibility as well. Do you feel optimistic when it comes to Hungary about the work you do and perhaps change?
On the long run, I'm optimistic. Mm-hmm. I think none of the system can last forever. Certainly the problems, the economic problems are just mounting and mounting ahead of the country. So I think at one stage the voters will decide whether they like it or not. And I don't know the decision, but we have a duty actually to inform the citizens and to give them the right to have the proper information. So I think the impact, what we are providing is very important, and it's above any financial KPIs or circumstances. I'm a lucky person because I'm an investor and I ventured in many other industries, so I'm doing well. So for me, media became not only a business but also a mission, and that's where things are turning actually. So it's more important that your kids should read the proper information and the neighbor should read the proper information. I think you cannot have a country growing and having a good future if the kids are not educated and the people are not able to read. So only the readers can understand how to operate a computer, how to operate a machine in the factory. So you need really educated people, and educated people can be created, or you can see only educated people when they see the free media.
Thank you very much, Zoltan Varga there, CEO of Central Media in Budapest, talking to me. And now we celebrate a decade in print for Design Anthology magazine. The title is dedicated to document the creative culture seen across Asia-Pacific. The brand new issue, its 39th iteration, is now under the leadership of editors-in-chief Simone Schultz and Jeremy Smart. It was a pleasure to speak with both of them. Simone Schultz and Jeremy Smart, welcome to Monocle Radio to talk about a magazine that we know well here. We're big fans of Design Anthology, which is celebrating 10 years now. And it's a special edition as well, because both Simone and Jeremy, you're co-editors-in-chief for the first time. Simone, perhaps I'll start with you. Tell me your relationship, actually, with Design Anthology. For how long have you been there? I want to know from you guys, the early days when you started at Design Anthology.
Sure. Hi, Fernando. Thank you so much for having us both here. We are obviously equally enamored with the stack, so there's some mutual fandom going on. And the kind of origin story of Jeremy and my working relationship is one we love to tell. So I started with Design Anthology in 2018, so it's been 6 years on the dot now. And I actually met Jeremy that first year. We were lucky enough to take a trip to Bali together as a team trip. We were doing a special issue on Indonesia. And it was really the first time that Jeremy and I got to spend a lot of time together. We hung out in the pool in between meetings and launch parties, and we really just figured that, wow, we click. And it was the start of a great collaboration. And we've worked very closely on every issue since, and on every kind of related project. We've started then, and I think it's been 20 issues now. This is our 20th together. And I kind of like to think of it as Jeremy and I like two puzzle pieces. You know, we have a really beautiful complementary kind of collaborative relationship. We fill in each other's gaps. His strengths and my strengths are really quite complementary. So yeah, that's where we started in 2018, and now we're here today. And I'm very proud to have Jeremy as my co-editor. Yeah, it's been a lovely journey.
What about you, Jeremy? Tell me more about your early days at Design Anthology.
So I suppose Hong Kong is probably at the heart of, I guess, all of our connections to Design Anthology. We were all based there from the beginning. So the magazine, I think, was 3 or 4 years old by the time I started, and I relocated to Hong Kong and started as an art director. So I guess my background was, or has always been, in magazines, but really on the creative side. And I suppose, given that we're quite a small team, it's sort of evolved into something much broader. And I guess here we are. For me, it's almost 7 years later, and yeah, Simone and I are now sharing this role, and I think it works quite well. And I think it's maybe a little bit unusual in the world of magazines. I think, you know, we try to create something, and I think a good magazine is something that has a unified vision and a point of view. And I suppose trying to do that with 2 people is potentially a challenge, but I think we, as Simone said, we're quite complementary, and I guess we come at it from with very different skill sets that are quite complementary. So yeah, it's a really nice working relationship, and very proud to call Simone my co-editor.
I just want to stay with you, Jeremy, because you mentioned Hong Kong, but you're based in Tokyo. That's quite interesting as well, because of course the magazine, perhaps the history, it all started in Hong Kong, but I think it's almost pan-Asian, the whole idea, right? So I think it's quite interesting that you're both based in different cities as well. I wonder if you can tell us a bit more about that.
Sure, yeah. I mean, I guess our editorial remit is one that is fairly broad. It's something like 60% of the world's population. Certainly not, that's not the number of stories we're trying to tell, but I guess in terms of geographic scope, it's really broad. And I think for us to be able to do that as a small team really requires us to be as geographically diversified and dispersed as possible. And so being based in Hong Kong, it was quite easy to travel in and out of different cities and I guess meet the people that you need to meet to run and build a magazine. But I suppose at some point it just made sense that we should perhaps be based in different places so that we can cover them in a little bit more of a deeper way, so that we're not always relying on the freelancers and our wonderful writers to, I guess, pitch us and tell us what's going on, and so that we can have a little bit more on the ground experience on a day-to-day level, so it's not always based around perhaps shorter trips. And so I guess that's how Tokyo came about. It was really, I wanted to stay somewhere in the region, somewhere that made sense for us editorially, but also commercially. And also there was probably a quality of life element there as well. So it's been quite a nice change. And I suppose in spending time in so many different markets in the region, and, we're talking to you from Singapore now, which is quite important to us, but you get a really good sense of just how collaborative the design industry has become and just how much crossover there is. And so, a lot of the time when I am in Tokyo, I'm meeting a lot of designers who aren't based there. A lot of people are coming there for inspiration, or they're coming there to work on projects, or for some other, maybe for personal reasons. Sometimes they're just coming on holiday, and it's this kind of like blurry professional, personal hybrid thing happening that's really nice. And so I think we see that in a lot of places, in Singapore too. So I guess that really speaks to our broader purpose around just bridging communities and bridging worlds.
And Simone, I have issue 39 in my hands, your first, you and Jeremy as co-editors-in-chief. Tell us a bit, of course the magazine is the same, it's great, so for all the fans of Design Anthology, don't worry, but do you feel perhaps a sense of freedom now being editor-in-chief? What do you think changed perhaps from the role before?
I mean, Jeremy and I have been producing the magazine collaboratively since 2018. So in a lot of ways, this is solidifying and sort of formalizing something that it's quite a natural progression for us. And we're continuing the legacy that was started in 2014, but with sort of a fresh and contemporary outlook and I guess our own perspective. A lot of things that people will recognize from Design Anthology and love are still there. We're not trying to, reinvent the wheel or do anything crazy. But, we've kind of introduced a sort of more newsy section called The List, where we can talk about new collections and F&B openings and sort of more lifestyle elements, which just helps because often we get pitched things or we come across spaces that we'd love to feature in some way. And that just allows us to give them space. And it's a bit of an editor's picks, a bit of a notebook, if you will. Yeah, I think we continue to look for and to tell the stories of design in the design community in Asia Pacific. And that remains our remit. It remains the spiritual and structural core of the magazine and the brand. I think Jeremy and I are also committed to developing the magazine beyond a print publication to become quite a three-dimensional experience. We really value meeting people in real life, having events, having our awards program, exhibitions, things that kind of are the print magazine made manifest. And so, yeah, I think that's something that we're looking forward to doing. And then, of course, just meeting new people and seeing what's next in the region. The story of Design Anthology is really tied to the Asian design community. And so as that grows, so will Design Anthology continue to grow.
Jeremy, I'm very curious as well. You were talking about being pan-Asian, and what are the biggest markets for Design Anthology, actually? I'm very curious. I mean, you're in Singapore, based in Tokyo, we have Hong Kong. So tell us, I'm quite curious, do you think it's evenly divided, or do you have perhaps a bigger readership in a specific market?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really good question. I guess Hong Kong and Singapore traditionally, given that they are kind of economic hubs for the region, in a way, they're cultural hubs. They have large English speaking and reading populations, and a lot of the money obviously flows through those cities, and therefore so do the opportunities. So the two, I guess, have always been quite important to us. But then in terms of a readership and in terms of where I feel like we often have the biggest impact, I would say it's probably Southeast Asia, in particular Indonesia, the Philippines, Thailand, markets where there is a sizable English-speaking audience, but one that's, I guess, underserved by their local editorial offerings and are largely overlooked by the global design media. Not entirely, but I think just don't necessarily get their moment in the sun. And so I think, after 10 years of it, I guess that's I think that's really resonated, and the audiences there are engaged accordingly. I think they really appreciate what we do, and they show up to our events, and they really support us, and obviously we support them as much as we can too. So that's quite a nice, I guess it's an important and quite a nice market for us. I suppose beyond that, the emerging ones for us are in some ways some of the more established economies. So Japan and Korea and China and Taiwan, smaller English speaking or English reading populations. And, that's obviously a big factor for us. But there's also the biggest room for growth in those places. And so I guess that's also why it's helpful being based in Tokyo and being able to visit Seoul and visit Taipei and spend time in these places so that we can remind people that we are physical and that we show up and we really care about doing things properly and committing to these markets for the long term.
If I can just add
Please.
to the publishing in English, sometimes we get asked why we don't publish in local languages, Japanese, Mandarin, Korean. And while that's certainly something that we've looked at, is this okay? Can you hear this noise behind me? No.
I think it's okay.
Okay. And so while we sometimes get asked why we don't publish in other languages like Korean or Indonesian or Japanese, that's certainly not off the cards at all. And we'd love to partner and kind of produce special kind of elements that are, and in fact, in the Japanese issue, we had a few Japanese stories. But I think it's really one of the kind of unifying principles that help us to tell the story of what's happening in the region to a global audience. And so I think that really aligns with our remit. And so it's pragmatic and it's philosophical in that way.
Simone, I'm curious, we're talking about different issues, because Design Anthology, there is a UK one and there is a China one. How much do you collaborate? Is the China one separate as well from the main one, right? How much do you collaborate with those other international editions?
Well, they're both separately licensed out to other publishers. Astrid Media in the UK is run by a team of fantastic women who we love working with. Yeah, we collaborate quite closely. We see them at design events. We have co-hosted events together. There's quite a lot of synergy there. The China team is also run out of Chengdu. And so they're really focused on sort of, I suppose, collaborations, and their work is of a more collaborative nature. And that's kind of a closer partnership because they select stories from our flagship publication that then they republish in Mandarin on their WeChat and Redbook platforms. And so we were actually just in Design Shanghai with them, where we hosted a talk kind of as their guest, where they had done a Design Anthology stand as part of it. But I'd say we look forward and we're trying to find more kind of collaborative opportunities there, but they're both quite independent while the DNA remains very similar and aligned.
I was going to ask, Jeremy, is where you are in the world, you were talking about new markets, is it still an exciting place to work on a magazine? I wonder in general, I know it's a very big question here, but is the publishing scene in Asia right now still very good? Do you feel there are new launches and there's value for print as well?
Yeah, great question. I mean, I think print media in Asia broadly, like it is a very broad question, and there would be a different answer for each economy, I would say. Japan, as you know, I'm sure Japan is very strong, remains very strong, is very creative as well in a lot of ways. And I think that's obviously a bright spot that we look to and that we, I guess, enjoy. I suppose the economies that maybe are less or have maybe matured more recently, they tend to be the ones that are a little bit more digital first. And I suppose it's which can present a challenge in some ways in terms of, say, marketing budgets being allocated. But in other ways, it also means there's space for us. There's space for making a magazine. It doesn't feel like, if I can use an example, somewhere like Korea, maybe, where to produce something in print, it's nice to be able to offer something that isn't necessarily catered to in a broad way, and something a bit unique and something that really lands and has a physical presence. So I suppose it works both ways. I think it could be healthier. I think we have big issues around distribution. I think we really struggle to just get the magazine sometimes where it needs to go. And I find, there's maybe sometimes a few too many middlemen involved. I think that's not necessarily getting easier either. So I don't really have a good answer to it, but it's certainly one of the challenges we face. I suppose then our counterpoint or our solution to that is probably going closer to our reader or trying to build personal connections with them. And so that's where events are important. It's where things like our new membership program is important, where people are, it's essentially a subscription offering, but it's one that includes, I guess, a little bit more depth and a bit more of an intimate relationship with, the magazine and the team. And so I guess making that really a big part of our distribution strategy, I guess, has helped us sort of mitigate against some of the more structural, some of the negative structural changes in magazine distribution, which, we're seeing all over the world. They're not necessarily unique to Asia.
Thank you very much, Simone and Jeremy. And issue 39 of Design Anthology is out now. And that's it for this week's show. My thanks to our editor, Flink Simons. If you have any comments or queries, feel free to write to me, Fernando, at fp@monocle.com. And remember, we're back next Saturday at 10 a.m. London time. Meanwhile, you can always listen again at monocle.com or subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. You've been listening to The Stack. I'm Fernando Augusto Pacheco. It's goodbye from me.